Thanks everyone for joining us again for our weekly Wednesday equity training. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Alyssa and Michael just to jump in.
All right, thank you. So I am going to kick us off today. Alyssa and I, if there's anyone new here, will do quick introductions in a moment, but that's actually part of using the platform we're going to use today. So I'm going to put those introductions off just until we get to that. We are not going to have a PowerPoint for today. We are going to be using Mural. We want this to be a very interactive, very conversational session. So I am dropping the link to that in the chat. And if everyone can click on that, you should be able to access the mural board that we'll be using for today. And I think when we get to that point, Alyssa is going to share that on the screen as well. But we will have it on the Zoom screen, and then you'll have it in your browser, and that's where you should be able to interact with the mural board. So that's how we're going to do the meeting for today. If you're in the mural board already, I see some of you popping in there. The first thing you see is logistics and tips. So I'm just going to talk through that really quickly. On the tech side of things, a Chrome browser is ideal. So if you happen to have Google Chrome, that's going to work well with this. Really, most of the modern browsers do. We've had good success with Chrome. When you come into this, you can choose to come in anonymously. So you may see yourself as an animal. You may see your initials. If you have a Mural account and you're signed in, you might also see your picture there. Most of you are probably going to come in as an animal avatar. I just happen to be the koala. For the basics, you'll be able to use your mouse to move around, so you can left click, and it kind of grabs the screen. You can use that to move around what you're looking at. You can zoom in and out if you have a scroll wheel. And then if you're on a laptop and it has the pinch feature, you can also do that. So there's a number of ways you can interact with it. There's also a follow me feature. I'll let Alyssa kind of speak to that when we get to the part of this where we are moving around. But there is a feature where you can kind of jump to where she is in the presentation to see what we're working on at the moment. But yeah, you'll be able to look around in here freely, and it will not affect what's happening for everyone else. If you have questions, we are not on Teams, we're actually in Zoom. Use the chat window in Zoom to ask us for help. You can also turn your cursors off. Since Alyssa is presenting this, hers will be on. We'd ask everyone else, if you can, to turn off broadcasting your cursor. The way you can do that is just hover over the little picture, the avatar that you will see of yourself at the bottom. That'll be the one on the far left. And it will give you the option to turn off broadcasting your cursor. That way we don't have the screen full of cursors moving around as we are working on everything. So those are the tech logistics. I'm going to talk really quickly through the group agreements that we have established through the last couple of meetings. These are exactly the same, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but do want to make sure we lift them up at the beginning of every meeting. So our group agreements are be present, listen actively, and use I statements when we're talking about how we are experiencing the topics that we are talking through. Participate to the fullest of your ability, and that's because our collective growth depends on the inclusion of every individual voice. I mentioned this is going to be a really interactive session today. We want to hear from you. We want you to speak up. We want you to be in the mural board. That's very important. The goal is not to agree, but the goal is rather to gain a deeper understanding. So that's kind of the point of all of these sessions. We want to get a deeper understanding of what equity looks like in the systems that you work in. Choose courage and bravery over comfort. Discomfort is kind of inherent with some of these conversations. Choose courage and bravery over seeking comfort. Challenge the way we have historically responded to homelessness, and see each of us and our collective growth as part of the solution. Moving on to the agenda, the main activity we are going to be doing today is asset and power mapping. So ideally, what this would look like is we'd be going through getting acquainted with Mural and each other, which is what we're doing now. Then we move on to participatory asset mapping. then power mapping, then context and scope, and then what already exists. And then we'd have a closing the container part at the end where we would sort of summarize everything, talk about possible next steps, things like that. The reason I said ideally at the beginning is that we are not going to get through all of this today. A 1 hour session is not enough to do an entire power mapping activity, really for one locality, much less a continuum of care like the Alaska Balance of State, where, in reality, it is a number of localities and each region can have very different power maps. So we want to flag that up front. We're not going to get through all of this. What we really want everyone to do is participate in this. We will walk you through what it looks like to get to the end, but we won't get through all the steps. Really, this would need to be done at the more local, more regional level within the Balance of State. So we want to leave you with the tools necessary to do this in your region. So that's a big point that we want to get at. You'll get a lot of useful information out of this and hopefully understand the process for it. And if you need help with that and you want to do this in your region, we also want to flag that you can reach out. You can reach out to your COC colleagues. You can reach out to Alyssa or I. We are all available to help you with this. So if you do want to do this in your region at some point in the future after seeing this, that is perfectly fine, and we are here to help. And I am going to turn it over to Alyssa now, so we can get a quick tutorial on some of the basic functions in Mural here, and we'll do our introductions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining us today and joining our Mural board using a slightly different platform. So we wanted to do a little bit of testing out so that you all can kind of get oriented and used to the board. So as Michael said, I think I'm sharing my screen so you can see where I am in the board itself, but you also, by clicking the link, are in the board, on your own screen. So we are currently on 1D, this introduction and practice. And to do our intros, we're going to test using Mural as well. So if you click in one of these boxes and double click it and start typing, you can add your name, your pronouns, your race or ethnicity, and then one word defining your day is the check-in question. And I'm trying to think of my one word right now that is work appropriate. Your day is gone. Yeah, it is pretty much gone, Michael. I wouldn't say mine was productive. It's gonna be my word.
Yeah, aside from this this last presentation, my day is gone and I do not know where it went.
And do let us know, you can either chat privately or just drop into the chat or come off mute if you're struggling with the Mural board. So just let us know that too. Helen, does bouncing mean like going from thing to thing to thing and just kind of like hectic? Or does it mean like bouncing like Tigger bouncing?
No, that is exactly what it meant, the first one. It's like a little bit here and then a little bit there and then this email and then that phone call and then a little bit more over here. And yeah, it's been one of those days.
Sleepy. Yes, I slept in a little bit. We had storms here last night, so I felt like the time to sleep. Friday crazy on a Wednesday. I think I understand what that means. I would have said Monday crazy on a Wednesday, but I think I understand the sentiments. Who is it, Rainy? Are you in Juneau, Abby? Where are you?
I'm in Homer.
Oh, Homer. We need Homer.
We're praying for some sun, but we're just simply not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So Tammy joined us, I think, after the link was initially dropped into the chat, so I copied and pasted it in there again.
Yeah, sorry, just saw that in the chat. If anyone else joins after this, feel free to let me know and I can drop it in there too.
And if you are struggling with the mural, you could always participate in the chat too. We will grab your thoughts and drop them into the mural board. So that's one of the reasons I'm sharing my screen, is so that folks can see where we are. But please feel free to use the chat as well. Zoom chat, that's right. We had repurposed this mural board, so there have been other meetings where we've been doing this in Teams.
I like Kim's discombobulated.
I really saw that. That sounds very Kim-ish.
Over here trying to figure out where to unmute myself. It basically means the same thing as Helen.
Bouncing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just not sure what to do next, but there's so many things to do.
Things to do.
Well, I mean, at this point, Kim, you have been 4 of my bounces, I think,
Huh.
today.
That's untrue. I've talked to you once.
This one, the Teams one, the
They're working.
text, and the
That's
email.
fair. They're working. None of them needed to be answered ASAP.
All right. All right. We are gonna move forward. As Michael said, we are not going to get through all of this today. At minimum, we usually schedule 90 minutes to 2 hours to get through this full board with folks. So thank you, Sherry. We can definitely add in yours. I'm sorry you're busy and frustrated. Folks who are struggling with mural or having it, for folks that are having issues with mural can be touchy, I know that. Please feel free to participate in the chat and we will definitely add your stuff into the board. But you can follow along here on my screen. So Michael mentioned participatory asset and power mapping. Really, at the end of the day, I mean, the word power can really have a negative connotation. I definitely have some kind of reaction when I hear the word power, because I think, and this is me using an I statement, I think for me, it's because it's often associated with corruption and abuse. But power, if you take it as it is, defining it really, it's necessary. It's really what's used to influence others' behavior and affect change within an organization or a system. What we're trying to really focus on is making sure that power is attainable for everyone and not just limited to those with the most resources and authority. Because when when we are sharing power, people feel more agency in their work and really invested in the system's overall success. So in order to get to the point where we are sharing power, we have to understand where power exists today in the current structure. I think also power is often described as something, like a thing that someone owns, which implies that it's this tangible thing. And the reality is that power can't exist outside of established relationships. People can't really own power because it really depends on how much they control resources others value, which again are based on relationships. So power mapping is really a visual tool used to understand who has more or less power within a given environment. So what we're doing, power mapping, is simply a way to identify who has power in the community and to figure out what will move those individuals or institutions to do what it is you want them to do. This is really a helpful exercise if you are hoping to become a change maker within your system, and identifying the most powerful players within your sphere of influence is really crucial if you're trying to make a positive impact. Again, power really only exists within the dynamics of a relationship. So determining who is already close to powerful individuals, who is underappreciated but essential to your system, and who has the most influence is really the purpose of a power mapping exercise. So This actually power mapping came from a restorative justice kind of background framework. So we've got this analysis grid where on our vertical axis, we're looking at the amount of people that this impacts. And on our axis over here, we have our positive all the way to our negative. So those who really, really support our agenda to those who really don't. And so as we move along this at the bottom, it's just explaining how we are mapping and how we are using this grid to understand the spheres of influence and the degree of influence different change makers have and whether they are more for our agenda or against our agenda. So this really talks through the different steps, and we have some links to share as well. And again, we're going to walk through as many of these steps as we can get through today. And as Michael said, like this board isn't going to go away, so you'll be able to access it. We will also PDF it. And in the links that we have, there's actually a Jamboard that also walks through this that you could link to. I also recognize that Jamboard is going away in October because Google is decommissioning it, but there are other resources that we can connect you with. So the first step is really to define the major problem or conditions that are negatively impacting your community. So we have an example in the example that we're going to walk through today. We're going to actually leverage funding decisions being made because we've heard that come up in the last couple of meetings that we've had with you. But I'm sure that there are other major problems or conditions that impact your homeless response system, impact your ability to really have an effective homeless response system. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. Step 2 of this is to understand the conflicting agendas. So what kind of agendas are out there that are against your like target or goal in this. Step 3 is to sketch the major issues or policy battles related to the problem conditions. So if we are using funding, it's really looking at what are those major issues or policy battles that are running up against, I'm going to say like equitable distribution of funding for homeless services across the Alaska Balance Estate. Step 4 is to look at the major centers of decision makers. Who are those decision makers that are making decisions about funding in your community? Step 5 is the major organized opposition groups. So who are those against your agenda? Step 6 is to look at your ally groups. So who are those ally groups for your agenda? And then step 7 is to look at unorganized social sectors. Who are those groups of folks that are out there that aren't strongly against or strongly for, but could have significant influence over this kind of agenda or problem? And how can we start to get them, for us, on our side, if you will? So this is just an example of a completed power map. And again, kind of using the restorative justice field, but that is an example. So we are going to go up to actually starting to do some of this. So as I said, we were thinking through what is a topic that would make sense to walk through this process with, or start to walk through this process with you all. And based on our first couple of conversations with you, the funding decisions piece has come up a couple different times. And so wanted to use that as a launching off topic for this discussion today, knowing that there are probably several others. So the first thing that we want to do based on this funding decision condition, is map the major institutions that impact the funding decisions. And there's probably more than one. So there's a couple opportunities here. And this is our L2. So who are those major institutions that make funding decisions, impact funding decisions in your community? And you can come off mute, you can put them in the chat, you can put them in the bubble, but I'm happy to put them in here for you based on the discussion.
HUD.
was wondering if that was gonna be the first one. What others do we have?
Keep an eye on the chat.
CBJs, that's the City and Borough of Juneau.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a good example. Think about all your funding streams. I know the COC is a federal thing tied to HUD, but there are lots of others, more than likely.
Alyssa, that's Borough, Borough.
Oh, gosh, I knew that. Woo.
Alaska and Louisiana.
That far removed from Alaska work. Sorry about that.
Oh, wait, no, Louisiana is parish.
Parishes. Yep.
Yeah. So would everyone be okay with me kind of saying instead of CBJ, but like local politics or local funding agencies or local government, maybe? Just to make it applicable to all of
government.
the partners.
I would say local government, because you could also talk about local grant providers,
Right.
Do you mean like philanthropic funders, Dave?
and private donors. Yeah,
Do you think that's
No.
that's separate, right?
that's separate. Yeah.
Yeah. Topic. Yeah, AHFC, I like that one being there. I mean, honestly, AKCH too, for all of you
Yeah.
as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would AKCH2 go within that HUD process or would it be its own, Alyssa?
So that's what I was gonna ask you. So these are the entities that have the funding to provide. Unless AKCH2 has its own funding, I would say that it is a major individual associated with the HUD funding if you are directing the way that funding goes. Does that
That
make
is
sense?
accurate. Yes, I agree.
So then you're actually an L3, which is individuals, entities associated with those institutions. So AKCH2 is associated with HUD because of the COC competition process, I'm assuming.
Yes. That's
Is
how I
there-
see it.
Is there a similar thing like that or a comparable thing like that for AHFC? And actually for AHFC, it may be an individual, not necessarily like another entity, but I don't know that to be true. Oh, state government, John. Interesting.
This
So
is
maybe
Sherry.
not.
Yeah, so maybe AHFC would be under state of Alaska. I think that comment went to me in the chat, but would that be accurate?
Yes, because then Alaska Mental Health Trust would also be at that same level.
This is Sherry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, wouldn't AHFC also be under HUD? Because I know for our funding, we receive money from AHFC, but it's a HUD match. So some of that is tied into HUD also.
Yeah, that's what I had mentioned too, Sherry, is that it's definitely a HUD-based funding group.
That's what I would think.
So their funding is, so the AHFC match is contingent upon receiving the COC funding from HUD, right, Sherry?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, Jennifer, thanks for that clarity. And hi. Oh.
I love the little giggles.
Sorry, I thought she was done. Okay. What about for local government? So city and borough of Juneau, city and borough of or city municipality of Anchorage, like other local government, Fairbanks, thank you, city of Fairbanks, borough of Fairbanks. Juneau. Matsu. What kind of major individuals are associated with those institutions? And again, could be entities or could be actual people.
That are like, that are funding sources?
I would say within the local government, what John pointed out is key, either the mayor or the city managers have a lot of say.
It was that, who had the sphere of control or influence over that funding? Who? And that might have been,
Well,
I can't
in
remember
this-
that question.
In Fairbanks, our local government doesn't fund housing. And our borough doesn't fund housing. So
In-
maybe every other place but Fairbanks, that would make sense.
And this is Sherry on the peninsula. We don't receive funding for that either through our borough or city. They don't fund housing.
So maybe
Are
for
we-
these,
Are we staying with just housing or are we talking about housing and services?
I think for these purposes, we're thinking more about the power structure. So if it's not being funded, but maybe ideally it would be, then who has the power to make that decision? Or influence that decision within the local government, I guess, for what we're trying to do here. And it's not necessarily one person, it's probably multiple people or depending on your voters.
Maybe,
Good one.
maybe not just a local government, but we add tribal local government. Under
Tribal
funding
entities would be
decisions.
almost separate.
Yeah, they would be separate. So
And somebody wrote up here, in theory, citizens have a stake in the government choices. So at this local government level, is that, I see the in theory part, is that happening in reality? Or is that more of a, their voices may be missing, minoritized or excluded?
I think Helen stated it beautifully with the word voters.
So that the voters do have influence over that then?
I would imagine. I mean, that's ideally how it's supposed to run, right? Like we vote on these things and they're supposed to be implemented. Now we all know the truth behind that process, but if, in the sake of developing this power map, yes.
Voters could influence funding for housing, not influence housing necessarily. So if we're talking about funding decisions, who the voters vote for, as well as how the voters vote on ballot initiatives, would have an impact on funding decisions.
My only comment is that happening now? Is that a reality or is that something that we'd like to see? Because I'm not seeing any influence by voters on who we put into office influencing our housing decisions. Money seems to be going down or staying the same by who we elect.
I think that's exactly the point. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but who we vote for, who we elect is basically where we're putting our values. And those people may or may not vote for funding for some of these needed resources. But ultimately when we vote our values, and our elected representatives represent the overall values of the voters.
And that would be a frustration of mine because I vote and I don't get represented.
Oh, John, I feel the same way.
So then I'm wondering if for local government, right, the L4 is consider who is missing, minoritized, or excluded. Maybe it is, I don't know how to word this, but it's like they may be voters, but they're voters who aren't actually represented in their representation at the state and or federal level.
And maybe that's where citizens come in. You know, all voters are citizens, but not all citizens are voters.
What about constituents?
Yeah, that works. I would say the other L4 or then would be people with lived experience. Or people who are disenfranchised, maybe? The people for whom it is very difficult to vote.
Are there different answers for L4 for the state at the state level, or are those similar?
I would say under the delegation piece that there's a frustration. Me and our delegation from Matsu does not support housing like we would like them to support housing. And I don't know about other folks, but that's just how our representation, our delegation representing us is.
Well, and while our delegation supports housing, they're in the minority and don't always get heard.
So then, I mean, does constituents feel relevant for the state level as well as missing?
I think so.
I agree with that.
Any different missing voices for the HUD funding?
I would say the same thing essentially on the federal level.
I could also say that smaller agencies get lost amid bigger agencies.
The appropriation of funding is sometimes limited.
Did you say the incorporation of funding?
Appropriation.
Appropriation.
You know, if you're the new guy on the block, you're getting the leftovers at times, right?
If that, right? Okay. Okay, let's go down here to our left and who are your key partners in the work that you do? Specifically within funding decisions, like who are your key partners? Who do you advocate to? Who do you have a voice with? Who are they?
AHFC. Speaking for Juneau in general, we have a great working relationship with the mayor and that office. So, you know, we can meet and have those types of discussions with them. We also collab with like Bartlett Regional Hospital or any, you know, our medical facility search, that sort of thing. We also have a relationship with any of the other provider agencies, so similar services.
Does anyone have funding from other governmental entities or departments or divisions or national organizations?
We reach out to work with local charities.
What about Alaska Mental Health Trust funding?
Definitely.
Regional housing authorities?
Yes.
Does anyone get ESG or BHAP? Oh, I guess that's AHFC.
SNAP ENT, maybe. I guess that would be state.
Who is that?
SNAP ENT for bill, you can bill them.
Okay,
It's
and you
Care with
said-
my house.
And you said at the state level? That's state.
Yeah, I think that would be state.
What about AKCH2? Are they a partner?
I think so.
Come on, y'all. Someone better say yes.
And I was also thinking ICA for AKHMIS.
Yeah, let me just clarify that these partners do not necessarily need to hold the funding that we're talking about, but they are just partners in this work to help either advocate for more funding, advocate for like they're partners in this work, but they aren't necessarily the ones that hold the purse strings here.
So Helen, I've got a question for you. What about the office, the Anchorage office for HUD with Carmen and those folks? Would they be a partner of ours?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
I also see your comment in the chat, John, that you partner with each other, so other service providers.
You mean like individual human donors, Helen?
Yeah. If we're talking about communities that we can work with and work through and who might have power, sometimes it's those folks.
I would say we partner with a lot of our local churches.
And you have community coalitions.
Now oh, that's interesting. That text moved. I don't know what you did, Dave, but that's pretty cool. That's great. which are the decision makers with the final say? So when it comes to funding, who makes the final decision?
Ah, HUD.
Do they though?
Congress.
The governor,
Governor. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna put HUD.
Assembly. City. Yeah.
Is the assembly at the state or local level?
That is Juneau. Yeah, it's a local.
Okay.
For philanthropic organizations, often it's either their board or their committees.
I was just gonna say board members.
For AKCH2 recommendations, it goes through the rank and review committee and then is approved by the board.
I would say executive staff have some final say so and some decision making buy-in there.
In some of these cases, do we feel like volunteers, individual donors, churches, religious organizations, community coalitions, like the entities over here are represented in the decision makers with final say, since we named some like boards and entities, not necessarily individuals? Or do we feel like those voices and perspectives from over here are missing over here?
I would say that might be a little bit more agency specific.
And maybe funding stream specific too?
Yes.
We didn't really talk about the tribal entities piece, but I'm curious about who, for tribal entities, who are the major individuals associated with tribal entities that have, that can make those funding decisions.
Maybe instead of entities, it should say government, because really it's its own government.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are
Sovereign
federally
nation, right?
recognized, yes. And then it would be tribal leaders, chiefs.
Tribal
And then it
court.
would be tribal court, and then it would be tribal members.
Tribal members still part of the influence or part of the minoritized missing voices?
It depends on the tribe, but it would be the missing voice, really.
Would Nahasda come in there as well? So federal congressional allocations?
As a funding source or as a decision maker
Well,
within that funding?
I would say as a
Nahasda funds are based on tribes or tribal members. So it would be the second one, right?
And then I think we got for philanthropic entities, who are the decision makers there? Their board and committees, right? And then other decision makers at the philanthropic level?
think that one's again where executive staff could come into play. There's some philanthropic organizations that allow staff to approve up to a certain level.
Well, I believe you got to get through a program officer to even get to the next level. So when you do your pitch, somebody makes a decision whether it goes to that next level.
Any voices that you feel are missing for this funding source?
Recipients of services.
Okay. Cannot make this text go away, Dave. I don't know what happened, but we're just gonna have Community
I tried to
Foundation
figure it
float.
I can't figure it out either. I really did something unique.
Yes, you did. Okay, so we're gonna go over to context and scope. What are the major problems or conditions related to homelessness that are negatively impacting the community? Basically, we're trying to identify those conflicting agendas.
Would not in my backyard fit in this area?
Absolutely fit. I was just gonna say, you know, we've heard a lot at the national level about criminalization of, you know, unsheltered homelessness. I don't know if that's relevant for you all, but I was just gonna throw that out there as an example, but NIMBYism, absolutely.
Expense and lack of affordable housing, expensive housing.
Access to resources.
As in like the inequitable access to resources, the lack of access to resources, or just what specifically about that?
I would say actually the literal access to resources at times. And that, you know, we have a lot of folks who are moved out of proximity due to behavioral issues or whatever, and then they can't literally physically access those resources because they aren't allowed to be in the area.
Got it. Okay. That was super helpful. I'm just gonna put literally so that I remember what we did. Okay.
What about education of the issue? Both from a leadership level and a grassroots level?
Like effective comm strategy, maybe. Lack thereof, education of the issue.
Addiction.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Gener-
too on the peninsula, during the summer months, people are limited on how long they can stay in their housing, especially if they're renting. It's only for winter months because summertime comes, they have to leave out, and then it's open for, you know, tourists that can pay more during those summer months.
Seasonal rentals.
I was just gonna say
Yes.
some seasonal rentals and the heavy focus on tourism across the state, really, right?
Oh yeah, we lose a lot
Yeah.
of accessible housing to tourism.
We lose access to hotels, basically the same kind of situation you're facing down south.
Mhm.
Right, absolutely. And even if we don't lose access to hotels, they run $5,000 a month.
Yeah, I was gonna say they the prices.
Lack of funding, implied resource scarcity. It's not that we don't have enough, it's that there's no political will to designate what we have to the problems we have.
Generational poverty.
I would say food insecurity as well. I don't know if any of you folks on this chat have experience, but I've written grants for access to monies to apply for food security, and because of our measurement due to space and population, we don't meet the requirement for those types of services.
Lack of mental health services. Or inadequate mental health services.
Maybe weird. What about qualified housing? I know that we've had dry cabins become an issue where we can't fund them because they're not considered stable housing or adequate housing.
Is that like, definitions of housing, like mismatched definitions? Cause I remember those conversations about dry cabins in the past.
Yeah, it's even the Inspire training, the Inspire standards are gonna be even tougher. So how do we go about driving waivers to more accurately reflect the Alaskan culture?
Yeah.
About seasonal
Mm.
employment.
Yes, and I'm gonna add what Morgan put in the chat too, not go to lack of communication between service agencies. Seasonal employment.
Because we've
I-
always done it that way? Would that,
Yes, the mindsets.
yes.
Bootstrap, the bootstrap mindset.
Before I forget, I did drop a couple, thank you so much, Sherry. I did drop a few links into the chat about power mapping. This Jamboard is like a thing that you can, I think you can make a copy of it. And again, Jamboard is going away in October, but walks through the same type of exercise. So yeah, and recognizing the time, you know, we did not, obviously, and we said that we weren't going to finish this today, but we got a really good start. This was a really great discussion. This board is not going to go away, and we would, you know, if you want a template of this, if you want, you know, a resource of this so that you all can kind of walk through this at the local level and go through all the different steps of this, please feel free to reach out. We can make a template. I think I have this as a template. And as Michael said, if you want us to walk through it with you, like work with the group, your local group on doing this, please feel free to reach out about that. I'm actually gonna go all the way over here and close our container, knowing that we didn't get through all of this, but I'm actually gonna summon you all. There we go. If you could write and or say out loud or put in the chat one word or phrase after today's session. Oh, I like productive. Somebody say something. Thought provoking. Power mapping is interesting, right? Because I don't know, using John's term of like, this is the way it's always been. So we often don't take the time to stop and interrogate it and actually think about like, why is this the way it's been? And really think through, okay, sure, we can acknowledge and honor the fact that it's been this way. And do we have to continue doing it this way because of the way we've always done things? And often that answer is, no, we don't. It worked for a period of time, or maybe it didn't even work for a period of time, but it worked, didn't work. We're acknowledging where it got us and we want to do something different. So educational. Thanks, John. Okay. Michael, is there anything else that you would want to share and or say in our last 2 minutes today?
I would just reiterate, we are available to help if you want to do this at the more local or regional level. Happy to help with that. I do think it can look very different, like I said at the beginning, from one region to another, one locality to another, and understanding these dynamics is often key to making more equitable decisions and looking for the kind of change you want to see in your system. So yeah, please reach out if you want help with that.
So we will make a copy of this board for as far as we got today. And then we will clear out this and make this almost as a template. and talk through how we could potentially help work with communities at the local level on completing this all the way.
Oh, Dave.
I literally don't know how you did it. But now I don't see it. I think you actually did it on the Zoom
Neither
screen
do I.
itself. I don't see it in the mural anymore, so I think it was like you wrote on the Zoom screen itself somehow. Very interesting. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope you have an excellent rest of your day and week, and we will see you next week to talk about authentic partnership with people with lived experience of homelessness, and we are going to have a fabulous colleague of ours with us. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.